but they're good.
Okay, this is Blanche Barton. I'm Magistra Templi Rex of the Church of Satan. I've been a member of the organization, for about 40 years, a little over. Public representative for about 30 years, leadership position most of that time. One interesting facet of Satanism is that, we don't worship a devil, with horns and a pitchfork and a pointed tail or anything. We use Satan as a metaphor, as he's always been, the Miltonic image of the rebel, the prideful, human, very human element within us all that is his own independent, creative, driven, striving, flawed personality. I think he's a lot easier for most of us to relate to than a lot of the other metaphors that are presented in various religions. Satanism has certain tenets. We're not dogmatic, but we do have, the 9 satanic statements. Anton LaVey was our founder. He founded the organization in 1966 on Walpurgisnacht, and he wrote a few books, the Satanic Bible, Satanic Rituals, and in the Satanic Bible is contained the 9 satanic statements. And mostly they advocate indulgence and undefiled wisdom and vital existence. Man is just another animal, instead of some superior being who can rule over the earth and all the other animals because he's so spiritually evolved. And the best one, the last one, number 9, is Satan has been the best friend that the church has ever had because he's kept it in business all these years. So I think Anton LaVey, people are perplexed sometimes that Anton LaVey had such a sense of humor. And they say, well, he had been in the circus, he'd been in the carnival. How much of this is just ballyhoo? How much of it was really serious? Was he just using it to make money or something? The truth of the matter is that a lot of his philosophy was definitely informed by his time in the circus and the carnival, but only in that he saw what louses sometimes people could be and what suckers they could be. So his philosophy was formed not so much by the esoteric path. He did enjoy esotericism to a certain extent, Crowley and Blavatsky and things like that. But I think he mostly he saw the potential of man, and he really wanted people to live up to the potential that they had. And he was frustrated. He was frustrated by the fact that humans have so much potential. I mean, this was 66. This was way before, self-empowerment lectures and all of these other people that came along after that and started these kind of self-help, guru sort of things. But his essence was always, you yourself are a god. And that's, again, getting back to writers long before, you are your own heaven, your own hell. You have the power within yourself. Don't put the blame on other people or some external force if you're not making this the best party that you have, because as far as we know, this is the one and only party we get. There's no guarantees for any nirvana or any heaven or any, paradise after this. This is your paradise. Look around you. This is a beautiful gig. This is beautiful. You've got lots of potential. Just enjoy it. Don't curse yourself with doubt and fears and This is the best that we can possibly make it. So don't blame some external source for your failures or credit it with your achievements. Be prideful in yourself. You create self-deification is what someone has called it, and I think it's a beautiful way of putting it.
Is there some cheekiness in his taking Satan? Because the Church of Satan, as far as I know, rejects the kind of dualistic good and evil idea, right?
Certainly.
And yet, like the I want to say mascot. Is that like...
That's good.
Yeah. I don't know if that's offensive. Of the church.
I can see the football game happening.
Yeah, right.
No, I understand what you're getting. The metaphor.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
The representation,
is that, he must have known that it was going to court a lot of controversy.
Of course.
Because it's not the church of self-empowerment.
No, that's right, and he didn't want it to be. And again, he did address this in the Satanic Bible, because as he was formulating these ideas, he started the church in 66, and before that he had a covey of eccentrics and weirdos and artists and oddballs around him before that.
Well, and that's clear. It's got style.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's got style for dirt.
Right.
The people who are drawn to it are fascinating.
Absolutely, and they always were. I mean, if you talk about the early days of the organization, before the organization even, there was a thing they called the Magic Circle. He was giving lectures on vampirism, lycanthropy, cannibalism. They had a cannibal feast, at one of his lectures.
What does that mean?
That means that they ate a human being, a part of a human being.
From where? Where did he
I think that the story was that they had gotten it, someone was working as a medical student or in the coroner's office or something. They got a piece of a thigh bone from a woman. Diane cooked it up with fava beans, which was the traditional way of doing it.
The cannibal Lecter.
Yeah. And they garnished it with caterpillars or some other little grubby things, and I think he was delighted that Xena also partook when she was little. She was a little tiny thing, yeah, and she liked the little crunchy bugs. The people that were there at the lecture, they wanted to taste the human flesh just to see, because it's supposed to taste like pig. Long pig is what it's called, and they wanted to taste that, but they were a little squeamish about the bugs.
That's so funny.
But Xena just started ripping into the bugs, and she just loved it all, so it was fine. But yeah, there were a lot of eccentrics, and that helped inform what the Church of Satan became. Also, he had been looking for, he was always drawn to the occult. He was always drawn to the supernatural, the weird, the odd, the Fortean phenomena. There were always people that were studying these things, and he felt that it was important to, that's the most intriguing part, right? Ghosts and goblins and spooky stuff and UFOs and, So he dug into that anywhere he could, and there was supposed to be this group of, I guess they were Thelemites or something across the bay, and they were supposed to have some esoteric knowledge. So he went and talked to them, and they were, kind of like just hanging out and speaking about things that really didn't connect to the real world, and just doing a lot of belly button contemplating, and he was very disappointed. And there was a lot of emphasis at that time. Again, the Satanic Bible kind of changed everything, but at that time, there was a big emphasis on personal initiation. You had to pay a master to become enlightened. And that was a scam.
And cults, sure. Lots of cults.
Yeah, we hold all the secrets, and you have to pass through certain levels of advancement and give us money. Of course,
join us and change your name and become one with us.
Yeah, he didn't want any of that, and he thought that was a bunch of malarkey. And if you've got something to say it up front, say it loud, say it proud, and if it works for you, then work it. He saw it as he wanted the rituals to be clear, precise, and workable. And that's what it is in the Satanic Bible. And again, getting back to, by a long way of going around, why call it Satanism?
Right.
The point being that the word Satan is scary for a lot of people because they've created it to be scary. And in calling it the Church of Satan, his point was, this is a word. Just like abortion, liberal, conservative, any hot button word that advertisers use or governments use or people use who try to scare you and manipulate you, this is a word. If you can't get past this word, and the reason this is scary for you is because you've been programmed this way since you were a tiny baby, that this is the evil one. The evil one, what the hell does that mean? So if I'm a Sikh, or if I'm a Shia, then the other guys are supposed to be the bad guys. And because they're of the devil, they're the others, capital O, I can treat them as poorly as I want to. If I'm a man and the women are subservient to me, I can treat them any way that I want to, and I can make the rules, and any enemy that you make is an enemy, a scapegoat. And, of course, Satan is the ultimate scapegoat. That's the devil. That's the one that you don't need to treat like a human being. That's the one that you can kill, that you can rape, that you can manipulate any way you want to. And Allah, God, whatever spiritual master you are on the good side of, they will forgive you and they will encourage you, because it's this us versus them, good versus bad. So the whole point of calling it Satanism is very pertinent today, because it's very, very dangerous, extremely dangerous, to make it an us versus them world.
Right, and so that makes total sense to me, because if it was called like the Church of Self-Empowerment, and it kind of goes around
precisely
I mean, it sounds like it's about getting your hands dirty and just not separating from the corporeal and the things that
I love that.
You know,
yeah.
but
Get in there,
actually
be a human being.
embracing them, and which makes sense why people like Boyd Rice or Kenneth Anger or artists like that, whose whole mode of doing stuff is not confrontation for confrontation's sake, but confrontation to eliminate the triggers that things have
that create alien
that alienate people
people.
from other people or from ideas.
And what did Jung do? You have to go into that darkness. You have to go way into that darkness. Everything that is human, Manson, Hitler, Mother Teresa, they're all me. That is potential within me. I choose not to kill today because I choose to live in a society where I don't get killed. But that's my conscious choice, you know. That's the contract that we live under. But I'm not going to reject that is a possibility within me.
You're not celebrating evil, but you're accepting it as part of the picture, that you're not struggling against it and you're just accepting that this is existence.
Right. And it's not like a punishment. It's not like a punishment that's like coming from somewhere else.
There's no false dichotomy created to make money off of you. You know, in conventional church, you're born into sin, and you have to pay and pray yourself out of that for the rest of your life. You're born in guilt.
And deprive yourself of experiences and like happiness and like just general human urges.
All the human sins, you know, they were invented for a reason, you know, all that envy and lust and gluttony, you know.
Sure, yeah, all the most human traits.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, but get in there and fight. I mean, it's hardest to do it with yourself. And again, getting back to the self-empowerment idea, Anton LaVey said that people are more afraid, they have a greater fear of success than they do of failure. And, you know, 90% of their life is spent putting roadblocks in front of themselves. And he found it very frustrating. And he wanted to connect with people that didn't, that freed themselves from those shackles. And also getting back to the origins of Satanism in general, there have been people that have worshipped, they usually call themselves Luciferians, or, the Hellfire clubs in England were attended by some very wealthy, prominent people. And they were mocking the church because they were against, big church in the same way that people are against big government or big pharma, whatever is big and oppressive. Whenever anything gets too big and oppressive, Satanists will be there by whatever name. We will be the ones, doing whatever we can to get in those chinks and get people to think, even if it takes banging them over the head a while.
I like what's been happening in Florida with the pamphlets and like getting people doctor's notes.
Wait, I don't know that.
I don't know if it's Satanic Temple or the Church of Satan, but they've been like, because of all the religious freedom garbage of people like denying people rights because of religious freedom. I can't remember if it's Satanic Temple or whatever, either one. They've been like making up like Satanism pamphlets and like handing them out in schools, and they've been writing doctor notes like from the church, like to people to give to their employers, to be like, you need to cover my birth control because it's from my church and it's my religious freedom to like have birth control provided for me.
That's awesome.
And it's really, really cool because it's just taking that religious freedom thing and being like, oh, you like religious freedom? Okay.
Well, our posture has always been, like the founding fathers, keep it out of the public square. Just don't go there. We don't want Shintoism and, Muslim religions or, Wiccan religions, or, all of, then we have to address everything. And the founding fathers, which again, the doctor really admired the Enlightenment, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, certainly Thomas Paine. They were strong men who had very strong convictions, and they wanted to create a new free world. And they knew the danger of linking religion and politics, because once the priest and the shaman get together, they've got this unholy duo that will terrify people or strong-arm people into doing whatever they want, So, yeah, it's a wonderful philosophy for certain people who are drawn to it. Now, most people are not drawn to it, and that's fine. And getting back to your point, just to continue your point about, if you just called it something else, then more people would be attracted to it. But Anton's philosophy was always, I don't need more people. I just need the right people.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say. Is there's a cheekiness to it in that the name itself sets up a roadblock already for people without an open mind.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, it's sort of self-regulating.
Only the people who would be curious what it was about and actually take the time to understand it would not. At least those people aren't the people who are having that knee-jerk reaction against it. Yeah,
exactly.
I didn't know Jane Mansfield wasn't. That was an interesting one.
Isn't that interesting?
I love that. That's great.
Oh, she was really authentically attracted to it too.
Wonderful person. Yeah.
She was, and she was attracted, I think, to Anton physically, of course, because he had this dynamic, dark charisma, certainly. But I think also she was ready at that point in her life to she was contemplating making a change away from the buxom, and she was a smart woman. She knew how to use her assets, certainly, and the other parts of her too. Yeah. But she was ready to transition into something a little different. I think she really did have an idea of maybe moving to San Francisco, maybe buying a big house, maybe hosting parties, being more of a socialite. And she was attracted to the philosophy because of, she called it Kale Gibran with balls. Just she liked the philosophy of it, but also it was so clear and so unpretentious. We have lesser magic, which is just basic, everyday cues as to reading cues for people, basic psychology, and greater magic, which is the going into the ritual chamber, going through the intellectual decompression that you need to get all of your emotions out as a psychodrama, to celebrate life, to celebrate lust, to celebrate, your vengeance or your anger, or to get it out. So that you're not blocked by it anymore. If there's something that's really bothering you and you're really fixated on it, then you know how it is. You can't think about anything else. It's just a big stumbling block in your way. And so if you ritualize it, you put the images together, you formulate and build yourself up to a real orgasm, emotionally or physically, so that you can let all of that out into the ethers, and then whatever happens, happens. It's not in your way anymore, because you've let it out there and it's gone.
Again, you got your hands dirty. You went into it and dealt with it and then released it.
Precisely. Yeah, you see it very clearly that way. Yeah. I like
That's really cool. Mm-hmm. Will you talk some more about those, some of the people who were initially drawn to the church and what they did?
I'd also like to know of those people and also how you were initially drawn to it.
But you came a little bit later, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I met, let's go back to the original group. He knew people from Lovecraft Circle, some of the Lovecraft writers.
I didn't know that they it wasn't like actually Lovecraft, right? He wasn't.
No,
they weren't hanging out.
No, but he knew August Derleth. He knew Clark Ashton Smith.
That's right. Those guys were all...
George Haas, Robert Bubber Johnson. He was actually close to Robert Bubber Johnson because not only did he write weird stories for Weird Tales and other publications, but he also was a circus guy. And so he was wonderful. He trained cats. He was an animal trainer. And I'm not sure when they met, whether it was through the circus or through other writer connections, but in any case, Robert Barber, I say Robert Bubber Johnson because that's how he pronounced it, but he was a very open fellow, and he did paintings that were beautiful, detailed paintings. And he also made, I saw one of these model circuses that he made out of tiny, tiny bits of balsa wood and actually moved. A wonderful fellow.
Cool.
So he was, and there were raconteurs. There was a guy who collected pornography, and there was somebody else who, the Valentine Man, Karen de Plessen. She had been in a royal family, I believe, in Scandinavia. Anyway, I wrote a lot about it in the biography because that came all from Anton LaVey's mouth, So I was trying to, when I started the biography, it was just spontaneously because he would tell me these stories, and I wanted to get them down, so I would start taking notes. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm taking notes because I didn't want this stuff to be lost." And he said, "Well, let's see what you're doing." And I showed it to him, and he said, "Wow, this is pretty good. You should keep working on it." And so I did, and
you became the official biographer.
Yeah. So that was. I actually met him in 1984 for the first time. I'd been an admirer of his for about 10 years before that, and I'd been a member for about 8 years.
You were quite young, right?
I was. Yeah. Now we don't allow people younger than age of consent to join. But at that time, I sent in my money, and I didn't apply for active activities because I didn't expect some, to be whisked away in some black limousine to some spooky, wonder, but that probably would have been a lot of fun. but they didn't do that in those days. We still don't do much of that. Not much, but sometimes. Only under very special circumstances.
But you were 15?
I was, let's see, 12 when I actually started calling myself a Satanist.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us, we come to a searching very early on, and we realize that, this doesn't work, and what really works. And I was excited about the Satanic Bible, and I showed my parents, I was an only kid, so we had really good communication. So I showed it to them, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that sounds interesting."
That's really cool.
But they read it, and my mom is the one that wrote out the check for me to join. So, and they were fine with it. And
they didn't become Satanists.
They didn't become Satanists. My mom was a Jack Mormon, and my dad was an atheist. But if it worked for me, that's cool, and that's kind of the way we have an attitude with our children as well.
They were Satanists already.
That's the perfect attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not big on indoctrination, but you want the child to flower as best they can, and whatever pleases them. So I'd gone through college, and I was going to be up in the Bay Area. So I said, I'm going to be up in the Bay Area, and if there's any possible way that I could meet Mr. LaVey, I'd really appreciate it. Just shake his hand and thank him, for being such a guiding force in so many people's lives. And so I got a letter back with a phone number, and I was, dancing around the house. I was really excited. And so I called him when I got up there, and took him out to dinner, and we had a lovely time
with
together.
With your folks?
No, my mom stayed in the hotel room, and she was comfortable.
Wait, I'm sorry, how old were you?
No, I was 22 by then.
Oh, okay.
This was a long time after.
Not when you were 12.
Like a little 13-year-old girl with this. No, nothing like that.
Taking him out to dinner.
No, this is years later, and no, we really hit it off, and I didn't know what kind of person he would be. I wanted to shake his hand because I read his books and I admired who he was, and he had been a great inspiration to me, and I knew he was to a lot of other people. But, he could have been pompous and sort of full of himself and, talking about Satanism, droning on and on and on. Instead, he didn't talk about Satanism hardly at all. He talked about old movies. He talked about, music and musicals and art and guns and jokes. And I was like, wow, this guy, he really lives it. He's really, he's not like I'm kiss my ring, I'm the founder of this religion,
He's just a cool guy.
Yeah, he was
at a
just
church.
really funny. And whenever he felt himself getting like sounding pontifical or something, he'd always undercut it with a joke. He had the whole, I told him that that's one book that I'd really like him to publish someday, is a book of satanic teachings, in the form of jokes, because Jesus did his teachings and they were a lot more boring. But but these the satanic parables would be,
really fun.
Be the jokes.
Yeah, totally.
Like, can you give an example of one that you remember?
Oh gosh, let's see. I heard each of them probably hundreds of times, so I should be able to. Okay, a guy is waiting to cross the road. Another guy is standing there beside him. He's a blind man standing there with his dog, and the fellow looks over at the blind man and he looks at the dog, and then he looks away, waiting for the light to change, and he looks down, and the dog lifts his leg on the blind man's trousers, and the blind man just looks ahead, and then he reaches in his pocket and he gives the dog a treat, and he said, the fellow said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but your dog just pissed on your trousers and you gave him a treat." He said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "I wanted to know where his head is so I can kick his ass." So that's sort of a parable for satanic teachings. I don't know how you want to, apply that in your life in general, but
I can see a couple ways.
Yeah.
But he was a funny guy. And if you look at the Speak of the Devil video, if you've seen that Nick Bogus did, he gets a lot of that humor and music too. Those were his real. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. That was one of his gifts too. Was music.
Right.
Yeah.
And he loved old music.
Well, yeah, he figured that the ideal for American music was from 1920 to 1950, and that's when you get the real bombastic. I mean, he loved classical music and opera as well, but as far as contemporary music, it was about 20 to 50 where the best music was written. And he was a big fan of Tin Pan Alley and the old musicals, and he played music like nobody else. He really did. He played. He had his keyboards, and he, of course, had programmed all the keyboards himself. And this is in the age where Prophet 5 and they were tweaking Juno 60 and stuff, and you had to create your own out of a sawtooth wave or something like that. You had to build from the wave to a sound.
Wow.
So is there recordings of Anton LaVey's synth music?
Well, yeah. I mean, the stuff that he's done, the few things, Satan Takes a Holiday, that's all him playing on his synthesizers that he programmed. But he would work and work and work on these sounds and cymbals that, and the brass that was just the right attack, and and people would say, well, you can't get those sounds out of these instruments. He said, well, I can. And when the transition came to all digital, then it was all about sampling and stuff. Right. But they said, well, you can't do that, same kind of sounds with analog. And he said, well, I have, and I do. And but he wanted the attack to be right. And he said, it has to do with the range, too. You can't play a trumpet in the same range that you would a piccolo.
Right.
Yeah. So
I had no idea that he was a synth pioneer,
That's
too.
so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, he was, and he played, well, because he'd played violin when he was a kid, and oboe, and then he had moved on to keyboards, to piano, and then band organ, pipe organ. He loved the organ because, again, it could do what he heard in his head, and what people want to do now, which is orchestrate. He didn't want to play in a band, and he didn't really want to create his own music. What he wanted was to recreate what he heard and what he wanted to hear, but he didn't hear the arrangements from other people. And so, he really, music was his soul. And tying it into Satanism in so many ways as far as the application of magic. Like someone would come in, maybe someone to interview him, or someone would come into his keyboards were set up in our kitchen in the Black House, and someone would come in, he'd start playing something, and the person would get this glow on their face, and he'd say, I haven't heard that song since I was probably 7 years old. What made you play that? I said, I don't know. That's what came to me, Teddy Bear's Picnic or something, and it would just immediately, like a scent, it washes over you, the same feelings that you had from your childhood when you hear a piece of music like that you haven't heard for a long time.
Or
just in tune. And talking about a lot of people aren't Satanists. Most people are not Satanists. It's almost as if we vibrate to a different frequency. And he talked about that when playing for the circus, too, because he played in the circus, he played in the carnival. That's what he mostly was doing in the circus. He also branched out.
Calliope and organ.
Yeah, Calliope and organ. And but in the circus, he also, in Clyde Beatty's circus, he also got to work with the big cats, which was fun. But originally, he was playing music, and he said you don't play the same music for monkeys as you do for horses or for elephants. You know, everyone, you try to play music that the animals will move well to. If it's a horse act, that you want to have music that will help them concentrate and help them feel the music. If it's an elephant act, you want them to feel comfortable and energized and happy, and they would react. The tigers would react to certain vibrations, certain ranges, and he knew how that was. And again, it's almost as if Satanists vibrate to a particular frequency with each other, and other people that aren't attracted to those metaphors and they read the book or they see the book and they throw it across the room in fear or disgust, that's fine, but we still need to be here for the people. That's what the Church of Satan is about, is we know that most people are not Satanists, and we don't expect them to be, and we never expect it to be a mainstream religion. I think it would lose a lot if it did, but we still need to be here to continue to codify and protect and preserve the philosophy as it was fully enunciated by Anton LaVey, with the black candles and the black capes and the carny aspects and the red lipstick and the high heels and the burlesque and all the fun of it as well. And that's an integration that's really, really important for people to get.
I think the fun is a really important aspect of
it.
What religion has any fun attached to it?
I know,
the
really.
theatricality.
It's like, yeah.
But without pomp,
it's not like, I love the drama of Catholicism, but it's so fucking dark and sad and I know you can party with Catholicism, but it's not the same.
It's just, I feel like there's a lot of guilt.
It's all the guilt and sadness and fucking
all the pomp is this serious business.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And is it really serious? Look around you.
Jesus died for your sins. That's a big deal.
But what's great about that kind of theatrics is that it's dramatic, but it is fun, and it is it's just very flamboyant and I think that's what's really cool about it.
And it's a real strength, and we want to preserve that. Yeah. And the leadership that we have now, Peter Gilmore and Peggy Nadramia as our high priest and high priestess, they've been with us a long time, and they get the whole package. They really do, and they don't want to stint on any of it, and they're very articulate, they're very poised, and they're very clear. And so that's our job, and to continue to experiment with satanic magic and satanic techniques and see where that leads us when it's integrated with modern technology and new social frontiers and that sort of thing. Plus, we always want it to be there for the people, the 14-year-olds, like I was, 14, 15-year-olds who are out there and they don't seem to fit anywhere, and to help them feel that they're not alone. And when I read the Satanic Bible for the first time, and I've heard this, you don't know how many hundreds of times I've heard this over the course of my time in the organization, I felt this way, but I didn't know there was anybody else out there who had the same vision that I did. And then I read the Satanic Bible, I knew what to call myself, For the children. It's for the children. It's all for the children.
So you were, after Anton died, you were high priestess briefly, right?
I was high priestess, yes, from the time he passed until I passed the reins to Peter Gilmore in 2001.
Can you talk about why you stepped down?
Well, I think it was largely because I had my son. Mm-hmm. I was doing it all myself. There's a lot of, in those days, especially immediately pre, the internet was there, but we weren't processing a lot on the internet. It was all through the mail still, filling orders, book orders, other kinds of orders, filling memberships, reviewing membership applications, doing interviews, networking with people. It's a lot of work for one person. And I had my son as well. And I was very committed, as Dr. LaVey and I had talked about homeschooling. We both wanted for Xerxes to be homeschooled. And so I had a decision to make as to, I felt that I had a responsibility to the organization and to preserve it and protect it, but I also had a responsibility to his son, our son, and to protect him. And also being a public Satanist, I felt that I might be leaving him vulnerable in certain ways. And, you know, it's enough that his father is who he is. We don't broadcast that. He didn't broadcast that when he was young. And we don't generally, you know, in homeschool circles, once they get to know us, once they know who we are, sometimes it comes out in conversation. But, you know, I never advertised. And so I felt to protect him and to be able to concentrate on teaching him and being the best mom that I could be, I had sort of a Sophie's choice that I had to make. Luckily, Peter and Peggy are excellent at running the organization, and I'm sure they would have been just as excellent raising Xerxes, but it just seemed more practical that, you know, they should take over the organization. And yeah, as I say, they've been wonderful, and they were already doing a lot of media work, doing a lot of interviews, handling a lot of the administration, and you know, they were there for me when the doctor passed away. There were certain challenges from certain sectors that we don't need to go into. And there was some turbulence, inevitable turbulence. But the people who were really with us stayed with us and were absolutely, I was humbled by the reaction and the outpouring of support that I got in those. And I couldn't have made it without it, without their love and support from Peter and Peggy and a lot of other people that stood by me in those days.
Well, I mean, obviously, like, the transition after he died, it must have been turbulent, but it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like there weren't, like, crazy power struggles necessarily. Like,
no.
People weren't, like, challenging you.
Well, no,
like,
because he had made the transition fairly clear. You know, I had the documents that I needed to prove that, yes, according to the Articles of Incorporation, the high priestess takes over if the high priest should pass away or be incapacitated, and I had documentation that was that, and I'd already been fully integrated into the banking and the leadership of the organization, so there wasn't really a lot of that, but. What's been interesting in, I think it's 17, 18 years since he passed now, in 97. So this is a fresh new religion. I mean, 50 years. We're just celebrating 50 years, which is a lot of years. But, on the grand scheme of religions, we don't have a lot of time. And it was interesting to see. I was interested to see what would happen after the passing of our founder. Does it have legs? Can we apply it in a wider life and without his leadership, direct leadership and presence? And it's been just really rewarding to see the people that we just had a gathering in Washington, D.C. for our 50-year celebration. There are teachers, there are people in government, there are scientists, there are, people in healthcare, all dynamic, youthful, excited, older and younger, but people that get it, people that understand. And it wasn't just a personality cult. It's a philosophy that is so easy for people to understand and apply in their everyday life that they find it very energizing and focusing, and they're doing what they want to have the best life that they possibly can. And that's the fun too of being with the organization as long as I have, because a lot of the people that were there, I had seen their first correspondence with us, when they were 15, 16 years old, and now they've gone to law school, and they come up and shake my hand and say, wow, your books really influenced me so positively. If it hadn't been for Satanism and you and the doctor, I could have gone in a completely different direction, but because of you, I stayed focused. I took pride in myself, and I accomplished my goals, and I really thank you for that. And again, it's very very enriching to have been around long enough to see that in people, and to see that Satanism is a philosophy. They say, well, is it a philosophy? Is it a religion? To me, the goals of a religion are to create a metaphorical language. And as I've said, it's almost like a group art project, because it's the art project of a culture, what we believe in, what we idealize, what metaphors excite us. These stories, like in ancient Greece or Babylonian myths that we draw from and we use within the language of Satanism to say this is what we find admirable. And so as a religion, you create ceremonies and rituals that bind you together as a culture because we are social beings. And again, this does communicate what we find. What are the transitions that we find important in our lives, and how do we sanctify those?
There's a power in ritual too.
Yeah.
Even if it's ritual for ritual's sake.
Yeah, of course.
You
yeah.
build energy
and
together.
a continuity, you know, a stability that I think is very important for a culture, meaning any of us to have. Yeah, and I think that we do qualify for the term of a religion, because also when the last thing that a religion might do is it helps you through the tough times. And does Satanism help you through the tough times? Well, I've been through the toughest times. I've lost my parents. I've given birth. I've, had the love of my life die. I've had brickbats and attacks on me, and the language that I've turned to has been provided to me by my religion, by my chosen religion. And when my back's up against the wall, what would Satan do?
Yeah.
Give him hell, take names. And, I'm not whimpering in a corner. I'm not, hanging, killing myself on a cross. No self-mutilation or, self-nullification here. No martyrs. No, it's going to be hard, and I'll just have to get harder, So, and that's, again, I think that's what a religion gives you, and that's what Satanism, what people find in Satanism that's strengthening.